Good morning. My name is Pastor Brent, and I am the Director of Discipleship here at Shiloh United Methodist Church. And I introduce myself to you for two reasons. One, there may be someone new in the room or someone who hasn't met me, but if you've been around Shiloh for a while, I wanted to remind you who I was, because it's been so long since I've come up and been able to give you a message. So I'm Brent, and I'm glad to be back. I missed being up here these last few months, and so I just wanted to let you know why I haven't been here. I haven't been up front in a while because the church has been going through a multitude of transitions. We've been transitioning preschool directors, and we've been transitioning and opening up a children's and youth ministry over on our Price Hill campus, and we've been transitioning our understanding of discipleship to be a life group mentality of asking people to join life groups. And on Wednesdays, we've been having a place for children and students and adults to come and to take that next step in their relationship with Christ. And so this semester has been crazy busy for me, and the leadership of the church and I made an agreement that maybe I'd step away from here for just a little bit while we worked our way through these transitions. But I'm back. And I'm excited to be with you all, and I missed you all. So thank you for letting me come be here. Do you want to give just a couple little updates in those? If you didn't know, we hired a preschool director. It's going to be a children's ministry director of preschool who will start January 5th. Wow. Her name is Beth, and you can read all about her in your bulletin. We've launched children's ministry and youth ministry over on our Price Hill campus. It's amazing. They've actually started to hit the rhythms already. We have children and youth coming, and not only coming without families, but they're coming, and it's been so meaningful for them. They're actually starting to bring friends, and so we're really making big segues over on our Price Hill campus. And I know and I love that we're starting to get some solid understanding that we at Shiloh are going to be more than a Sunday morning church. We're going to be a church that lives life together. We're going to be a church that has meals together. We're going to be a church that studies together. And so I've loved this last semester, and I know that we're moving forward in the way that God wants us to. So I ask, and I hope that you're going to offer me a little bit of grace. It's been a while since I've been up here, and it's been even a little bit, I might do things slightly different than Pastor Dave, but I'm going to do my best to do it right. Is that okay? I'll do my best to do it right. Pastor Dave normally gets out around 1, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were on track. Doing it right, that's so much of what Christmas is about if we really stop to think about it. Christmas is a time where we always want to kind of make sure the traditions are done. In my family, one of the big traditions is we go over to my grandma's house for dinner, and we want everything to be just right. We put the fine china out, and we all have to act like our moms taught us to at the table. We want to be just right. And what we know is just right is we want to compare it from the year before and the year before that. And if it meets the standard of those, that romantic view of what we've done in the past, then we know we've done it just right. And so we start to compare that dinner. I know that many of you may have come on Christmas Eve to one of the 4 services we've had, and I know that Christmas Eve service for a lot of us is about doing it just right. We want to relive that memory from childhood or from the past years, or that memory that someone told you about and what that service may be like, and we wanted it all to be just right. I don't know about you, but when I give gifts or when I receive gifts, especially when I receive gifts, I want it to be just right. I hate returning stuff, so give me the right size. Just right. So much of Christmas is about being just right. And when it's about being just right, it's about comparing. It's about comparing to the past, comparing to what others have done, and comparing. And that comparing is a dangerous place, because when we dare to compare, we end up hurting. When we dare to compare, we end up hurting others, and we end up hurting ourselves. Let me explain what I mean by compare. My wife and I, we've moved to exclusively shopping online for Christmas, and I love this. One, I get to shop in my sweatpants on my couch after my kids get to go to bed, and the UPS driver delivers those presents to my house. Amazing, right? But the second piece, and the more important piece of this shift, was the fact that I became a comparison shopper. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal to many of you, because many of you may be comparison shoppers, but I'm not. I've always been kind of this guy shopping mode when it took to buy stuff. I don't know if many of you know what guy shopping mode is, but let me tell you about the last time I went to a shopping store, I don't even know what they're called, shopping store, I don't go there, I just get online. You had cart. Anyways, I went and I got out of the car, and as I walked up to the glass doors, I had decided that I needed a pair of pants, and by the time I got to the glass doors, I knew what I wanted, and as I opened those glass doors, I knew there wasn't going to be a display, there wasn't going to be a person, there was going to be nothing that would distract me, and I dipped, I dodged, I ducked. I was like a heat-seeking missile, lasered into the men's department. I made it. I barely slowed down. I found the right color and the right size. I snatched them off the shelf, and I kept going, and I walked towards the register. Some may say I raced towards the register. And I knew I had won because I got back to my car. I had pants in hand, and it had been under 15 minutes. Winner, right? Thank you. I thought it was a good thing too. That's the opposite of comparison shopping. There may have been other pants, there may have been better things, but I didn't care because I was in guy shopping mode. But for some reason, when I get online, everything changes. I sit on my computer and I start to look at a product, and the next thing I know, I've got 13 different websites open, and I'm trying to compare and figure out which of the attributes are really important to me, and I start reading those little reviews. You know, I want to know what Frank from Illinois really has to say about the product, and Tommy from Texas, I mean, that guy probably knows something, and I start counting the stars to figure out, because I want the product with the most stars. So you guys with me? Stars are obviously what everybody wants in a present. And so we start counting how many stars we have, and I start comparing all of these things. And then once I finally decided that's what I want, then I close all those windows, and I start to open up different windows because I want to figure out where the very best place to buy it at. And so I start opening, and I compare the store to the store to the store, and I spend just as much time figuring out where to buy it. All of a sudden, I'm a comparison shopper. And that's probably a good thing for my family and the way we spend money and the gifts that I'm able to give. Because when we compare any two items, we always end up with a greater than and a less than scenario. And that's the point of comparison shopping. And that's great when it comes with products that we're trying to shop for. But the problem, the same process, it doesn't work with people. Because people are not products. There are just too many factors and emotions to come into any real, quote-unquote, best choice when it comes to people, their attitudes, and their actions. But somehow, as a society, we have come to the conclusion that we can look around at each other and we can pick and choose which people are right, which people are wrong, and which people are more important than others around them. And we start to compare people. And when we compare people, when we dare to compare, we always end up hurting. It's a theory I find all throughout the Bible. Today we find ourselves in the wake of Christmas. All of our candles are lit. We had Christmas Day this week. We are in the wake of baby Jesus being born, right? This is the same place that King Herod found himself 2,000 years ago. If you've got your Bibles, go ahead and open them to Matthew 2. If not, pull out your message map from your bulletin, and we're going to get started in this. In Matthew 2, we find ourselves in that post-Jesus world, and the Magi, or the wise men, as many of us may know them, they'd stopped in Jerusalem to talk to King Herod, and they said, hey, did you know about this baby? Did you see the star? We've been following the star, and we're trying to find this baby. It's going to change everything. And then King Herod turns around and he talks to his chief priests and his teachers, and they start talking about this coming of a Messiah. And by the time we get to verse 3, it says, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. See, the king, he starts playing the what-if games that leads to comparing people. You know what? What if? What if? What if? Many of you may not know what I'm talking about, but I know we've all played them. You're at work and they bring in someone new, or you're on a sports team and somebody new joins you, and all of a sudden you're in this what if mode. What if they're better at that than I am? Or somebody, how dare them, they come and sit in your row at church. What if people like that person better than me? Guys and girls often are asking, what if that person's more attractive than I am? And the what if, it starts to fill our head, and we need something to do with it. And so what we do is we start comparing each other. And we decide we want to find out which attributes are the most important so I can decide if I am better or the other person is better than me. And we start to compare people like products. We start to go down that greater than or less than scenario. And no matter what, when we enter that scenario, we end up feeling threatened. King Herod, he's no different. He feels threatened by a baby who didn't even have a place to be born. The king is threatened by a baby who didn't even have a place to be born. So by the time we get to verse 16, if you scan all the way down, if you're in your Bibles, by the time we get to verse 16, it says, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with time he had learned from the Magi. See, when he started to compare, we ended up hurting. But this isn't just the pattern we find from King Herod. It's a pattern I find all throughout Scripture. We can open up in the beginning of the Bible and we go to Genesis 4. Pretty early in the creation, right? Genesis 4, we have two brothers, Cain and Abel. They both make offerings to God and they start comparing each other. And then the what-ifs come. And Cain probably had good what-ifs to ask. But that what-ifs led to Cain taking his brother Abel into a field and killing him. Comparing ends in hurting. We can flip through further into Genesis 37, and we find a band of brothers wondering about one of their other brothers. That brother's name was Joseph. Remember, he had that coat, that nice coat with many colors? And the brothers start asking questions, the what-if questions about their brother Joseph. I mean, what if Dad really does like him better? And what if because they like him better, they're going to actually give away all of my and our inheritance to that guy? And the what-ifs lead them to selling off their little brother into slavery because they've decided that they're better and they're more important than he is. See, comparing leads to hurting. This comparison, it doesn't always have to come out of jealousy. You can flip even further into the Bible and we get to 1 Samuel. And Israel's got a king now, and that's what they wanted. But that king, Saul, he finds himself at odds and comparing himself with his number one military leader named David. We know him as he becomes King David. But in 1 Samuel 18, Saul starts hearing the townspeople sing, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. See, Saul starts comparing his loss and he loses sight of the great victories. It was the thousands that he killed that got him to be king. He loses sight that he is David's king. He loses sight that a victory for David is a victory for the kingdom, which is always a victory for the king. He starts comparing and he feels that he's coming up short. The what-ifs don't work for him. And so Saul starts trying to plan on how to kill David. When we dare to compare, we end up hurting. So before we go too much further, I want you to realize in your life, who are you comparing yourself to? Or maybe, who are you holding up to your own standards that maybe shouldn't be? Because when we do that, we choose to lose. We're going to cause hurting. When we compare ourselves against others, there's always a loser. A person who ends up hurt. When we compare two people that were never meant to be the same, someone always gets hurt. And we can dare to compare, we choose to lose. See, we start to miss the point as soon as we start to compare each other. We compare and we forget why we're here. When we compare ourselves with others, we shift from God focused to us focused. And when we make that shift, once we've made that dangerous shift from being God-focused to us-focused, it changes everything. We move from asking the question of how do I fit into this world to how do I compare to the world. See, how do I fit into this world makes sense. As a child of God, how do I fit in here? How do I compare to the rest of God's creation is not a question that we were designed to ask. Am I meeting those minimum requirements is really what we're asking when I want to compare myself from Texas from Tommy or Frank from Illinois, right? Am I meeting those minimum requirements? Am I at least doing what they're doing? Because if I'm doing better than them, then I must be doing okay. Somehow that has become the measuring stick. And I hope that we can shift our thinking today. And I'll be honest, I don't really want this message to be a self-help message. I mean, I hope that it does help each individual in some way. But what I'm more interested in is I want to be a church that stops comparing. I want to be a church that when someone new walks in the door, that we stop comparing them to the people that come here, the people that could come here. I want to be a church that stops comparing itself to the church down the street. I want to be a church that stops comparing itself to a church that's some other place. I want to be the church that God created us to be on this corner at this time. In order to be that, I need us all to be the people that God created at this time in this place. Because I believe if we're the church that God needs us to be right here, then we can be the community of Delhi that God needs right here. And then we can be the city of Cincinnati that God needs in the U.S. And then we can make the difference around the world. And it can start by us being what God needs us to be. King Herod, he missed the point. A baby of a not-so-well-to-do family was born in an outlying town. He turned what was supposed to be an exciting time into genocide as the two and under generation of that town was killed. He just missed the point. See, we're not that far off from King Herod. I was just reading a study about Facebook, and it said that Facebook is actually causing people to feel worse, and it's all because we dare to compare. The mission of Facebook, it's to make the world more open and connected, but this study says that it's actually just making people feel worse. The study was out of the University of Michigan. Now, I know some of the Ohio State fans want to shut down right now. Nothing good could come from Michigan, but just give me a minute. All right, it was something good. One thing, this study. It proved that there's this correlation between Facebook and feeling lonely, having anxiety, and in general, people just feeling worse. You know, a website that was meant to make people feel more open and connected somehow was making people feel worse. And their explanation from the study was that people are looking at the posts and the pictures and the videos of the highlights of their friends and followers' lives, and then they start to compare it to their own. You see this picture? Go ahead. This picture is of my son, Jackson, and my daughter, Ava. It's a 3-year-old and a 16-month-old, and this is on Christmas morning. My kids were jumping literally for joy in their brand new bounce house. And I, as a father, thought, this is a moment of joy that I need to share with the world. So I pulled out my smartphone, I snapped the picture, I put it on social media, and here it is. Later on that day, I got on Facebook. I wanted to make sure the picture posted. And I really wanted to see if 3,000 people liked it or not, right? Well, anyways. And I got on there. Before I could find my picture, I saw picture after picture of other presents parents had given their kids and other presents people had received. And what I thought that morning was the most joyous occasion that I needed to share with the world all of a sudden seemed like normal. Or maybe not even that great. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to compare myself to other people on Facebook, but it wasn't that hard to all of a sudden look and go, wow, that joyous occasion that this morning that I thought the world needed to see, maybe it wasn't that great. And so that's what's happening on Facebook. See, people are seeing post after post of the highlights of other people's lives, and they wonder why it doesn't compare to their whole life. because nobody posts the mundane of the on Facebook. Very few people walking down the hall, selfie hallway. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen. We only post the greats. Maybe a few of us have the nerve to post, and then you put at the bottom, fail, But very few of us actually have the audacity to put the negatives up. And so we get on these social media and we look at that person's life must be amazing because bam, it's awesome, bam, it's awesome, bam, it's awesome. And then I look at my life and every moment isn't awesome. And so I start to get into that comparison, and what happens is I miss the point. Instead of feeling connected and cheering on my friends about the amazing life that they have, I start to compare. And this type of comparison is exactly what we read about Jesus battling in the Gospels. If we open up the book of Mark, we can find a story about a wealthy man who came to Jesus, and he came to Jesus asking a question that I think if Jesus walked in the room, besides we'd be like, whoa, Jesus, but we'd all want to ask. And the question's, hey, how can I know I'm saved? Tell me how I know I have salvation. How do I get the keys to your Father's kingdom? And the wealthy man comes asking Jesus this because the wealthy man thought he already knew the answer. So him and Jesus, they start to go back and forth in this conversation. It's really all based around the Old Testament understanding of the Ten Commandments. And Jesus asks the wealthy man's like, absolutely, I did that. And he has all the right answers. And they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And this man is answering it perfectly. And so we have this wealthy man. He's a good guy doing good things. And when we compare him to the other people that were around listening, this guy becomes great. But then we have Jesus. He does what Jesus often does, and he just drops the boom on him. He says, that's great. You do all those things. That's awesome. But there's one thing that's keeping you really from being connected to God. I need you to sell everything and just give it away. I need you to give everything to God. At the end of the story in Mark, it says that he left sad. The man that had everything, the man that really came to be the measuring stick for the rest of his community. He came to be the this is how you get into heaven guy. And he left feeling sad. I find this in such interesting contrast that later I look in the book of Luke and we find Jesus telling a different story. He finds himself at the temple. And we don't even know if he has a conversation with this lady, but this older widow comes up and she's only got two coins. She drops the 2 coins in the coffer. And we don't know where she stands with all those 10 commandments. We don't know where she stands with all that. But we know that Jesus says, that lady, what she just did, that's praiseworthy. See, Jesus is showing us that God's not looking for us to hit any minimum requirements or that we can just do better than others. Because that wealthy man, he was given way more than 2 pennies to the church if he was following the 10 commandments. These are the answers we get when we dare to compare of how am I doing compared to that person. And Jesus, he's asking a totally different kind of question. See, God's looking for our all. He's looking for our everything. Our everything, our all that we have has nothing to do with anyone else. Think about it. Our all that we can give to God has absolutely nothing to do with what the person next to you has. Because you can only give your all and not worry about what they're giving. Before God, we can compare others, but God's not interested in it. So how we compare to Jesus is the real question. And here's the fact, church. We all fall short. We're going to come back to that in a second. But before we do, I just want you to hear that when we dare to compare, we just miss the point. We lose focus that God wants our everything. And we dare to compare, we just choose to lose. So when we stop comparing and we start being what God created us to be, we start winning. Is that my jacket again? Sorry. That's all I'm taking off, promise. You can use that later. Thanks. All right. When we stop comparing, we start being what God created us to be. We start winning. And I don't know about you, but I always want to be part of the group that's winning. When we dare to be what God created us, we start fulfilling our dreams. But more importantly, when we dare to be what God created us to be, we start fulfilling God's dreams. See, I don't believe that God's leaning over the pillow, the fluffy pillow-like cloud and just plucking up the best. I don't believe that. Doesn't make sense to me. You know, that's the best person in this church, and that's the best person in this family. And, well, if you knew what that person went through, that was the best person to come out of that situation. Because here's what that really looks like. Here's all of my creation. I'm only going to pick out what the best of my creation would be. See, God created everybody. So why would God be picking out the best parts of his creation? That system just fails when we start to think of ourselves as God's created. See, because I don't think God's interested in comparing and contrasting his creation. In fact, I almost know that he's not. But here's the good news, is that he's not plucking out the best. And that we'll never, ever measure up to Jesus Christ. That's great news. That we will always fail. If we had our picture on Facebook, we would have the word fail when it came to comparing ourselves to Jesus Christ. And that is good news, church. Because we fail, we can rely on the grace of God. Because we can never be the answer. It's by the grace of God that we are ever worthy. It is by God loving us, even though we could never, ever compete or compare to Jesus Christ. We need a reliance on grace of God and not on the idea that we may or may not be better than someone else. I heard this great analogy recently about what it means for someone to work their own way to heaven. They said working your own way to heaven is just like leaving California and expecting to swim to Hawaii. You've got the people, they walk right up to the edge of the beach. They put their toes in the water. Ooh, it's cold, you know. And they lean over and they might even squint and they try to see the island. And they can't, so they just sit down right on the beach and go, I'm never going to make it. What's the point? But then you got those of us who decide, you know, this is what we're supposed to do. So we get in the water and we swim out about 20 yards or 40 yards or 60 yards into the ocean. And then we recognize those swimming lessons we took at age 5, maybe they weren't as stellar as we thought they were. And that's as far as we ever make it. But then we've got those people that have been training for this. Those who've been making that effort, those who are ready for this swim, and they make it out about a mile or two. But the problem is, that's shark-infested water, and it's dinner time. And then we have that one person that tries to make it. We'll call him Michael Phelps for this situation. Genetically predisposed to be a swimmer, raised in the right family, has all the right swimming ability, been training for his whole life. He gets in the water, and he makes it past the 20, 40, 60 yards. He makes it past a mile or two. He makes it, but he becomes dehydrated and exhausted and fails. See, because there's no way that any of us are going to make it to heaven on our own. Yeah, some of us may be able to make it a little bit closer. And some of us may be able to look back and see the people that didn't make it quite as far as us. But the reality is we all fall dead short in the water. Because without grace, we're never going to make it. See, God created each of us with a particular purpose at a particular time in a particular place to help reign is his kingdom, to share his love with those around us. I know this because I read it right out of Psalm 139. It says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." So we can't go on acting that if our only purpose in creation is just to be better than someone else. That doesn't even make sense. We have to go on acting knowing that God gave us a particular purpose in a particular time at a particular place with these particular people. So it has nothing to do with how we compare to someone else. I believe God is calling us to be that authentic person that God created us to be. That sounds like a great line out of a last sermon of the year. Go be the authentic person God created you to be. Go. Right? What does that even mean? Thanks, Pastor Brent. I'll work on that. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be that authentic person God created me to be. 2015, that's what it's going to be about, being that authentic person God created me to be. I really don't think it's as hard as we make it out to be, though. So let's just break that down, and I'll explain what I mean. The sentence starts with being authentic, being that authentic person. Just recently, I learned, or maybe I had a brand new eye-opening experience of what authenticity really was. I was in a high school Bible study, and this is Shiloh is joined with a couple other churches to launch a Bible study in Oak Hills High School. We're meeting on Monday mornings, every other Monday morning in a classroom of a teacher. And we have students showing up 45 minutes to an hour before school to learn and read the Bible together and to spend time praying with each other. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. This isn't only a high school Bible study, but it's a high school Bible study led by students. And the young lady that was teaching it, she was teaching what it meant to be the authentic Christian. And she did what most high schoolers may do. She needed a definition. She pulled out her iPhone and she asked Siri, define authentic. Here's Siri's definition: conforming to fact and worthy of belief. I had my mind blown. How would the word authentic have the word conforming in its definition? I thought to myself, conforming would be, authentic must be individual, marches to his own beat, something like that. But in the definition, it was about conforming to the fact that was worthy of belief. So to be truly authentic, it means that we conform to something that is shown and lived out as fact of who we are in a way that people really believe. So to be the authentic you means that you live in such a way that it becomes fact about your life of what you're conforming to, and we know that because of what you're doing and saying and believing in everyday actions. And as a preacher, to me, we have two options when it comes to conforming. We can conform to the world, or we can conform to Jesus Christ. We have a choice. We can conform to the world and believe in the more and more and success, and it's all about me and I'm going to be the best. We can conform to this I dare to compare because I need to win and you need to lose kind of mentality. Or we conform to what we learn when we hear the teachings of Jesus Christ, when we want to conform to what we hear in Scripture. We have the choice to conform to something. So what is it that you're going to choose to conform to? Another way to put it is, who are you going to let, or what are you going to let define you? Because to be authentic, we need to know what defines us so we know what to conform to. So the next part of the statement of being that authentic person is that we're going to be the authentic person that God created. This one's not that hard. God created. God is God. You're not. God is God. You are a child of God. God is God, and you are his creation. So if we're going to be that authentic person that God created, we need to live in a way where we are not caught up in our own life, but we're caught up in the life that God is giving us. I read this right out of Proverbs 19. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. So now we know what it means to be authentic. We know what it means to be God created. And the sentence ends with this small little statement of us to be. Small little words, to be. It's future tense. It's not something we've already done. It's not even something we can't accomplish right now. It's what we're going to be. I was in a life group, a men's life group, and we studied Andy Stanley's Time. If you're on our Right Now media, you can download and watch the videos yourself. But we were in a life group, and we had this whole discussion around what it means to be. And it blew me away. Two simple words. Because here's the reality of the to be statements. Let's talk about 2015. I want to be healthier in 2015. I want to be healthier in 2015. Who's with me? Awesome. My definition of healthier is I'm going to work out more. I can go and I can try to do 12,000 crunches on Friday, January 2nd. I'm going to give myself January 1st off. January 2nd, 12,000 crunches. And at the end of 2015, I'm not going to be able to stand up and say, I am now healthier. Mainly because I'm going to die on Saturday after doing 12,000 crunches. But I can be healthier if I choose to do those 12,000 crunches a couple days a week. Not 12,000, but break them up, right? So I do a couple every day, or a couple times a week, and I do it for a week, and then I do it for a month, and then I do it for a few months, and then by the end of the year, all of a sudden, I have done my 12,000. 12,000 is probably a low number, but anyways, but you have met that goal. You are healthier because it's the everyday actions that answer that to be statement. How many of you maybe your 2015 is I want to be skinnier? Anybody with me? A couple people? Some people that are ashamed, I know, because everybody wants to be skinnier. That's not true. Being skinny, the to be part, isn't about me starving myself one day in January or for a week, or starving myself till I end up in the hospital. That's not how I become skinnier. It's the everyday, consistent choices I make around what food I put in my mouth and what exercise I do. It's those everyday, individual things that culminate into a big, massive change in my life because it's to be. I want to be a better husband, a better parent, a better child, a better friend. Anybody with me in 2015? It's the to be statement. See, vacations aren't the answer. Presents aren't the answer. One massive week isn't the answer. It's those half-hour increments that we choose to be with the ones that we want to be in relationship on a regular basis that accumulate by the end of the year that say, I love you. I loved you enough to spend a half hour every Tuesday at dinner with you. I loved you enough to spend these half-hour increments on a regular basis. It's not the vacation that makes a good parent. That's just bonus. It's those small incremental differences, and the same can be said when it comes to our faith. So if we're going to be the authentic person that God calls us to be, then that takes everyday, consistent actions that show that we're conforming our life to Jesus Christ because we are God-created people. See, we start winning when we stop comparing and we start being what God created us to be. We dare to be what God created us. We start fulfilling our own dreams. When we dare to be what God created us to be, even better, we start fulfilling God's dreams. And I believe that as we walk out of 2014 and into 2015, there's two questions and one challenge that I can put out before us that'll really get us there. As we walk into New Year's, I want you to answer this question for yourself. Who or what gets to define you? By the way, these questions are on the bottom of your message map if you want to think about them later. Who or what gets to define you? What is it that you're going to conform to in 2015? You have choices. If we can make those choices, we can start the year off conforming to what it is that we want to be defined by. And not because our boss asked us to work all these extra hours, or not because we fell short on finances, not because we needed more, or the new ad or the new blank came out, but it's because what we defined ourselves to be in the beginning of the year. The second question is as simple as, who do you want to be a year from now? What goal do you want to accomplish between now and a year from now? And what are the to-be actions that cause you to do it? What are those little everyday actions that cause you to be defined by the way you want to be defined a year from now? We have choices, church. And the last one's a challenge. It's just one of those to-be statements. I challenge you to come the next 2 weeks because we're going to be wrestling with our identity, the identity we find in Christ through the holy sacrament of baptism, through the holy sacrament of communion, in the series, A New Year, A New You. And so if you want help in learning what it means to define yourself in Christ, the next 2 weeks for you. And we ask you to come, and if you have friends that are struggling with that definition, bring them. 2 weeks, that's all we're spending time on, is a new you and a new year. I want to say thank you for letting me come up and be in front of you all again. It's been a joy, and I just want to say thank you for giving this time. Before I go, I'm gonna say a quick prayer. I want to pray over 2014 and pray a blessing over 2015. So will you pray with me?